Table Talk is not your typical D&D ttrpg podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of Table Talk roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies.
Alrighty, and we are live back at it with another episode of Table Talk. Just your two hostesses with the mostesses. It's me, Alejandra, and your other host, Mariah.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back. And today we're actually going to take a look back at past Ale and Mariah.
Yes.
At the infancy of our TTRPG careers, gaming hobby, and just kind of like reflect and also think about what fucking advice would we give ourselves back to the point where like we knew nothing. We knew nothing about TTRPGs, barely knew how to dungeon, much less dragon.
Like, what do we wish we knew?
Yeah,
when we were first starting out in the hobby.
100%. I can dictate. I don't know. I don't think that I've told the story of like how I started D&D on this podcast.
Not like originally, I don't think.
Not the original. I've told about like how you and I met.
Yes.
Which was separate.
Which that campaign was how I started.
Cool.
But yeah, you haven't told your like original origin story yet.
So when I started, it was my first year of community college, and I had a friend who happened to bring up the fact that he was like interested in playing. He'd never DM'd before, but he just like floated the idea by me and a couple others, and we were all like, I mean, we're nerdy, we play video games and shit, like I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons. Do I know what the fuck it is? No, but like he modically explained it. And I was like, well, yeah, like, sure. Like, I'll try it. Why not? And he's like, cool.
Do anything
and then,
once.
Yeah. And then he was like, cool. I've bought a bunch of books and read all of them. And so we're going to sit. Yeah, as one does. And we're going to sit down and do the thing. And I was like, okay, cool. So like we went over one night, made characters that night. It took for fucking ever because, of course, he's new. We're new. We don't know what the fuck we're doing. Flying by the seat of our ass. Basically, he's just opening books for me, and he's like, "Read this, and like whatever sounds spicy to you, go for it." And I was like,
"Yeah."
Okay.
It's when you and Alyssa made your VTM characters, and we were there for just like hours on hours because none of us knew what the fuck we were doing.
Exactly. I'm like, you just hand me a tome, and there's a lot of words that I don't know what they mean.
Yeah, and it's somewhere in here. We'll look together.
I'm gonna go based on vibes and. Yeah, so like I went through the book, and like any self-respecting bisexual woman, I picked a tiefling rogue.
Solid
you know,
start.
The stereotypes are there sometimes for a reason, and I just have always just been like, I'm gonna slot myself right in here. Yeah, so I was a tiefling rogue. Her name was Nefera. I remember asking him, I'm like, ooh, can I have a little magic owl? And his name is Cosmo, and he like I was going off, and he's like, yeah, fuck it, whatever you want. I was like, you know. In the present, I'm like, I'm a rogue. What the fuck am I doing with a familiar? Like, no. But
you have this like Technicolor owl that's just like in the background.
He's just like
throwing ass. And it's like you're not stealthy anymore.
No, not at all. But like it was a fuck it we ball moment.
Yeah.
And I remember coming to the session, and I like did a little bit of research after his preliminary pitch. And then when I found out that I have to like act in front of people, I was like, ooh, I don't I also like have the real bad issue of like I am a prideful woman, and I am self-aware in this.
One
might say I do not like failing in front of people.
No, God forbid. I'm a former gifted and talented kid turned burnout. So I also have that. If it's like I must be excellent or everything is worthless and nothing was achieved.
Correct. Like if
different
you tell
origins, same location.
Same location. We got to the same path at the same time.
Yeah.
We met at the crossroads, shook hands, and said we'd go forward together.
Support group. We just took different journeys there.
Correct. So yeah, so I have that real bad. I'm like, I will not attempt something most of the time unless I know that I've practiced it in private.
So
and
you've
I'm good
perfected
at
it in like the cloak of darkness.
Correct.
Where no one can see you. Yeah.
Correct. But D&D is something that I'm like not familiar with, don't know how to practice any of it. Like,
you sort of need other people to participate, which is a bitch for that tendency, because
that is the bitch of the hobby.
You have to go through like the horror of being perceived, and you
front
can't,
of others.
Like, which is really disrespectful.
Yes. So my solution for this was I'm gonna bring 2 bottles of wine for me. These are Allie bottles, 2 bottles just for me.
Which we should refresh. Listen, you have a monstrous alcohol tolerance. I always have.
I do.
So that was just like for you to feel a little something. That was for you to have like a buzz.
To take the edge off, truly.
Yeah.
I finished 1 bottle before we even started playing.
Yeah, fair enough.
It was also shitty wine. It's the
college.
Worst.
It wasn't good.
It was so
barefoot wine or like
no. The thing is like it was like a red wine. It wasn't even like my normal cheap fruity shit. It was like supposed to be a good wine, and it tasted like ass, and I was mad about it. But I sure as hell downed it, and so
Mama didn't raise a quitter. We're gonna put her down.
This is my only source of inebriation, and we're gonna check it because we spent money on it.
I mean, yeah.
So I drank that bottle of wine, started the game, and yeah, it was with me and like 2 other guys and him. And these 2 dudes, these 2 bumfucks, really, like they just were not invested at all in like what he was dishing out, right?
They were not serving one act play. They were in fact not. He was actually like, I mean, he was doing a great job for like first time DMing, like telling a story, painting a picture, and like show like whatever. And these guys just couldn't get like off their phones and just being so checked out. And like until combat was happening, they weren't checked in. And then they'd just be like, I cast my biggest spell, or I do the biggest amount of damage in my turn, and then I'm done, and then I'm back to my phone. They were just extremely not engaged. I, however, 1 bottle of wine in, was very engaged. So I was like, can I do this? Can I do that? I remember looking through my sheet and trying to be like, I know he explained all these rules to me, and when it would be my turn, I really took action economy and was like, I'm going to max some points on this. So I was like, what objects can I interact with? What like every little thing that you technically can do on your turn, I was trying to do something. You're like, I was given a book of matches. Like, how can they be used? Like,
correct.
Just the weird stuff that you get in that backpack.
Things that I don't pay attention to now.
Yeah.
But I really was like, I have this many feet of rope. Can I fucking sling it on this tree and like do some weird like I was really balls to the walls pitching everything under the sun.
We love to see it.
Yeah, which by comparison was far greater than what these 2 chuckleheads were doing. So he was really letting me just get away with whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because I was engaged. And then I remember stuff like they just wouldn't talk to NPCs anytime we were in a town. They just wanted to like, they got there and they wanted to leave right away. Like no talking to a shopkeeper to resupply, no trying to figure out what's going on in this town when he's clearly dropping hints that there's something happening.
It's like the expeditious video game style logic where it's like, we're only doing quests. We're only doing
main quests, no side quests.
We're only doing main quests. Like, we're not talking to people. We don't have time to dilly-dally.
We're speed running, actually. I'm triple jumping in this corner so that I get teleported to the end game.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was trying to figure out like who's around me, like and like I talked to a shopkeeper. I'd like flirt my way into stealing some potions, and those potions were really, by God, the only reason we lived later, because nobody else had anything, and we would.
They didn't bring a Band-Aid. They didn't.
Yeah, we find zombie bears and shit, and like I'm over here. I remember one of the most ridiculous things I pitched. I was like, so I have a disguise kit. And I was like, can I put the disguise kit on my owl and make him look like a possible dragon in the sky and use fucking like
if he flies real high.
If he flies really high and I use like what's the spell, thaumaturgy, to make noise, and I make it sound like a dragon. Can I scare?
I paint some little scales on his belly feathers.
Correct. And then can I perhaps scare this zombie bear away, because we are getting rocked. And
also, how much owl was it? Because sometimes owls are pretty big.
He was I think I pitched barn owl.
Okay, so he's not like one of those like 20.
He's not a
wingspan
big
boys,
yeah.
like one of those mountain friends.
No.
Like, that's basically a dragon.
Yeah. Not a terribly big boy, but I really was just like throwing shit at the wall and see if it stuck. The worst you're gonna ever hear is no.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so like I was really just doing the most. And I remember another time that was really frustrating because like we were at a tavern. Somebody got into a fight because of course they did, because they were like murder hobo action crazy guys. And I diffused the situation by having her seduce the band of mercenaries that was getting angry. And then lo and behold, I just go have a group playtime in a different room, I guess, which was fine. I wanted this.
A consensual wrestling session.
A consensual wrestling session, but it did trap me away from what was happening. So then they go to the lady that's supposed to be like giving us our quest, and they are failing at like asking her any relevant fucking question about anything. And I was like fucking just going
just, like,
crazy,
yelling through the wall, be like, ask her what's the
I'm like looking over at him and I'm like, how long is this group playtime session, group wrestling match gonna last? Like, can I barge in there? And he's like,
it's like, well, there's 8 people in here, so
he's rolling dice, and he's like, girl, I'm so sorry, but you're gonna be in there for a minute. And I was like,
I'll be there.
Yes. I was like, what if I'm so talented and they just finish quickly? Like I couldn't get out of it.
Not 8 of them.
So I'm just watching them like just absolutely fumble the bare bones of a social interaction with this character. And I'm like, oh my God. Needless to say, that didn't last long. And eventually I was like, hey, I don't like, listen, if you ever get a different gang going, sure. But I don't think I'm having the funnest of times carrying the weight of the world on my back every time we sit down. And he's like, no, that's fair. So that was my first exposure to Dungeons and Dragons. And I definitely didn't touch it again for a few years after that.
Yeah, because the next time you played was when it was the Eberron campaign.
Correct.
That, was the precursor to the Ravenloft campaign. Different people played in that. But yeah, that was my first one. Like, I knew about D&D just because, like, have always been nerd hobby adjacent. But never really played it. It just wasn't really, I'm from a really small town, and it wasn't really a thing that anybody did that I knew of anyway. And then like we started my first job out of college, and like Dean, the software developer I work with, like huge nerd, love like McElroy Brothers and like Taz Balance and all of that. So I got into that, and then the guy who ran our campaign that we met in, we were talking about like playing a game in the office, and then of course COVID happened, so we all got sent home. And eventually, like that summer, I think like I got in, like we were all kind of in the same COVID bubble at that point. So I started playing with like that guy and a group of people that you eventually joined.
Yes.
I think like definitely I was similar in the like the prospect, like the acting prospect of it was definitely the most nerve-wracking for me, because it's not really something I've done ever. Like, you know, I did other creative things, like I've done dance, I write, I was in band, I've done other stuff, but like I've never really acted or did improv or anything like that. And so for me, like getting over that fear of having to like be, like The Adventures on Balance or Critical Role or like Dimension 20 or something. Especially like it's great to watch those to get an idea of what games can be. But then you're like, oh no, I can't do that. And I used to be like super insecure about the fact that I really didn't do character voices. And it's funny now because I really don't do them now that much either. like I'll put a slight twang on like my voice sometimes, but half the time I will forget the voice. Like I want to get better at voice acting. Like I would like to take some improv classes and like get a little better, improve the skill. But it's still just not something that I do a ton now. But I portray the characters in other ways, where it's like, especially when you play in person, like physical acting is so nice as a tool because it just can help you get around. You can change your posture and you come off like a completely different person.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, that was probably like when I was like thinking about advice that I would give myself, it would be, I think, to not stress out or feel like I had to be like a Tony Award winning actor.
You and I both were like, either I serve Oscars or nothing.
Or nothing, or everything's pointless and I should die. And like, yeah, neither of those are accurate, obviously. And some of that is like, I do feel like I got shit from like previous DMs about not doing character voices, which definitely made me more like
self-conscious about it.
Self-conscious of it. Yeah, my brain is fried today. But yeah, like maybe more like hyper aware. So like, don't do that, definitely with new people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like especially if you're new to the game, like you have enough to manage unless you have an acting background or it's just something you like to do, or you like to do impressions, or you like to do voices anyway. I probably wouldn't worry about it, especially if you're playing D&D, because you have a lot to keep track of anyway.
Yeah.
That it's then like trying to remember a voice, and then it's like, okay, stay consistent with that voice. Because like that's also hard, especially when you're running games, where it's like if you give people distinct voices, then it's like, oh fuck, now I have to remember what everyone sounds like and do it consistently and not flip like and interchange the voices. Or like if you hear other people doing character voices, it's very hard for me to not mimic what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Same of like when I go and visit like Cajun family in Louisiana, like I will have an accent that I never have just because it gets in your head.
I have the same thing with like Latin family members that do have an accent. If I'm exposed for it too long, I will start having it. And I'm like, I've never had an accent. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you sound like a different person.
Yeah, entirely.
So it's like that, like, I feel like that is like one thing that intimidates people. I know like there was that TikTok going around of like, oh God, why am I not with the program today? She was on John Bernthal's podcast. In The Punisher, play in God of War.
Yeah. I don't know his name.
The guy's name is John Bernthal. I can't think of her. I'm gonna have to Google it.
Oh yeah, I don't remember her name, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Where she was like explaining to him like, oh, like D&D and and whatever, and he's like, what is that? And so she explains a little bit, and she's like, do you want to play? And he's like, yeah, like right now. And she's like, yeah. And so she just starts like she in the moment just goes, yeah. So this is, you're walking through the woods. You have a bow across your back, and you hear a noise off in the distance. What do you do? And it was such an interesting video because you can see like the moment where he kind of shifts in demeanor from going like, oh, what is D&D? Like,
yeah, then he's like,
lights up. I guess I take my bow out and like, how far is his first question? He's like, how far away is it? Like, and he was so just like certain. He's like, yeah, tell me how far it is. And she's like, okay. And she's like, say you roll this. And then you're very perceptive. You add this to it. This is what you get. So
you get like a 17.
Yeah, with a 17, that's pretty good. You hear it about 20 feet away. And then later it's like, she's telling him that he encounters an owlbear. And he's like, well, have I ever met an owlbear before? Is it friendly? Which I loved because his initial reaction was not, I'm going to kill it. It's just like,
yeah, it was
well, like, it's an animal.
Can it be a friend? Like, is it friend?
Yeah.
Which was very cute. Yeah.
It was
Deborah
so
Ann
cute.
Wool is the actress name. Deborah Ann Wool.
Incredible. Yeah.
Which I adore her.
Yeah. She's so an actress on top of she's in like some other big APs. And it was such a great example of that moment of like teaching somebody, but also this fact that like, no, yeah, like you really can just start. It doesn't ever take like, oh yeah, if you ever want to like sit at this table and like whatever, like all these people that you don't know, that can be very intimidating. Coming into
like,
something that you've never
sit down
done
and make a character and like get you to, it's like, no, you can kind of just start riffing. And it's like, yeah, they're both actors, so I think that probably helps somebody get into it. She did it so seamlessly that it's like, oh yeah, you can just show people why it's like magical and fun, and immediately, like, ideally you just fall into that like playing pretend like you would as a kid. And it's like, that was really, really cool. I liked that a lot.
I think that's like, that is also one of my biggest, like, my biggest initial like resistance to it was getting back into that play mindset and how unnatural that is when you have been like forced into just adulting forever, and like that's just so far behind you that the initial feeling of like, you mean I'm just going to sit at a table and play pretend in front of other grown adults? And sometimes that can feel a little bit like, what if it's silly? What if I'm what if it's weird?
Like, what if I make a fool of myself? Or,
And it's not something we like naturally do in our day-to-day anymore as adults. And it can be a little intimidating, but then getting, like, my biggest advice would be to myself, one, it doesn't, like, same thing, like, it doesn't have to be a world star performance, but my biggest advice would be like, just like start with playing yourself, like do a self-insert or whatever, and then just like don't even think about like, oh, how am I going to portray this character? Just think about how you would react to a scenario and then go, because your natural innate reaction can just be that, and then you'll see how the game starts going, and like the character will begin to change and grow in front of you, and you'll eventually like
fully
realize you've stepped into something.
Because it's like, as you interact with more stuff, like that character is going to be fleshed out and built, and it's like, I mean, I think all characters definitely have something of their creator, their actor, or whatever in them, like any good ones, right? Because it helps you connect to their motivations and portray them and stuff. But it's like, well, what if you were a ranger in the woods? Like, well, you're not. So eventually there is going to be a divergence, right? But yeah, like you said, your innate reaction and just kind of leaning into the play of it is very cool and is very important. And I feel like strangely is something that gets a bit divisive when you try to explain or talk to people who aren't in the hobby, or it's like, nah, that's weird. Like, what do you mean? Like, adults are just like playing pretend, and it's like, well, why is that weird or bad? Or it's like, it's not hurting anyone. Like,
no.
Like, I
had a conversation with my partner where he was kind of saying something similar, of where, you know, he mentioned something like the people at his work, he does not tell them what his major hobbies are. You know, he doesn't tell them that he loves Warhammer 40K and D&D, or like TTRPGs and Pathfinder and all that stuff. Does not expose himself to that because he is a conventionally attractive man, and then all, like, most people don't assume his nerdy hobbies like from that.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, and I was like, well, why? Like, why is that? I've always been pretty open about it, no matter what scenario I'm in, or like people, and I'll just be like, yeah, this is the thing I like to do. And some people are surprised about it. Some people are curious or whatever. But he does have a point where he was like, no, but like inherently there will always be a group of people that don't get it and will judge you for it from then on.
It is also like, I can explain that one for you, because your partner is also neurodivergent. Like, shout out Drew. The impulse to mask.
Yeah, correct.
That's it. That's correct. The whole thing. Because I was very much the same, and I still am. Like, I'm the most authentic version of myself now that I ever have been. But definitely, like, historically, absolutely no. Like, I really just made myself into whatever people wanted me to be. And so that included my opinions, how I talked, how I dressed, like what I said and what I didn't say, like to the point where I had to figure out who I was as a person because I didn't know. And there are a lot of reasons that people do that, you know, to fit in or to be accepted or to feel safe or secure in an environment. Like, there's a ton of motivations for that. And I mean, I don't always think, you know, everyone doesn't have to know everything about you. Like,
For
if you
sure.
want to have segments of your life where, like, these are the parts of myself, maybe I show up with, like, these specific, like, curated parts of myself for this group of people, and then maybe there are other groups of people where I have other parts, or I show up as my whole. You want to have people that you can show up with as your whole self, and like that should be your core of like very close friends, like your inner circle people. But you know, I think that's valid. Like, I'm definitely
100%.
more open about it now. Like, it's something I'll mention like lightly. They're just like, oh, like I play D&D and like ttrpgs and things like that, and it's nice because, like, you know, with like Stranger Things and the movie, you know, like there's a lot more just awareness
It's
of what
definitely
it
come
is.
more into the forefront,
Yeah.
especially in recent years, because Stranger Things exposed it. Then we got the D&D movie. Then we got Baldur's Gate, which was like the highest grossing. You know, it was a mega hit, and that definitely put it at the forefront for a lot of people that had never even thought about touching D&D. And it's become more popularized for sure. But it's he mentioned something to the like of like it irritates him, the idea of like someone perceiving him as childish because of a misunderstanding, and that's
I understand that. Yeah,
100% valid.
I get that, especially at work, where it's like there's some environments where you're like, I want to exercise a certain amount of control over how I'm perceived, so I will not, are you making judgments on how you think people will react to certain aspects of like your personality or life? 100%. But like, that's also just sort of existing as a human. And yeah, sometimes you want to play it conservative and just be like, hey, I would like to have more control over how I am perceived in this moment. And so I'm going to be very selective about which cards I show and which I keep to myself.
100%. Yeah.
And so it's like, you don't want to live your whole life like that. Yeah. But also,
I tend to like, I'll still pick and choose, obviously. Like, I'm not just shouting from the rooftops to anybody that will listen and be like, hi, I play D&D. Do you? Like, no, I'm not doing that.
That would be strange.
But like, if I mention it, there's definitely like no sense of shame in it for me, or like
for sure
wariness or anything. Mostly because I've just always lived a life of like, I've genuinely never given a single fuck about anything anyone's ever thought about me. I'm like, either you like me as a person or you don't. And I like,
yeah, which accurate, can't relate historically, but I'm more there now. But like, yeah, definitely that took years of therapy.
But I also feel like the things I found most is that the more genuine, honest, and open I am about the things that I like, enjoy, and identify as, the more likely I am to encounter other people that also like the things and identify and all that stuff. So like, I've always like, I've just taken to like a full open policy, and like, if they don't vibe with it, that's cool. I'll read the room and bypass that or whatever. But if they are into it, then it's like, cool. I've now found another person that like enjoys the things and gets it, or is at least curious and wants to learn more. And
it definitely makes it, more like expeditious as far as like finding out other like sleeper cell nerds that are kind of
nerds is what I'm
a little bit
undercover.
For. Yeah, I think I land more so now where it's like I mention it, sometimes I'll briefly explain what it is. Like, you really don't have to do anymore, thankfully. But and then it's like, if no one asks anything about it, or there's no like great reaction anywhere, and there might be if someone has a hobby that like I'm not particularly interested in, that I may not like ask more about, then I'm like, all right, tight, and I can we keep it rolling. Yeah, and that's sort of where I try to land now with it. But it is interesting.
Yeah. I definitely think also like just in general, looking back, like if I could do this for myself, like, you don't need to, again, it's easier to say than do, because again, I have that whole like, but I need to be great at the thing that I'm trying before I've ever done it. You don't need to know every fucking rule or every mechanic or any of that to have fun and enjoy the game. Like,
no, and sometimes that I think can get in the way of you enjoying the game.
Correct.
Because especially with something like ttrpgs, where like it's really common to have house rules, or to like modify things, or to make different rulings, maybe at their like be kind of more rule of cool and kind of go with something. So or like we've definitely known people who are very have memorized that rule book, and then it's like it's frustrating when somebody's like gainsays it or is like, I'm the DM, I'm gonna do what I want. And it's like, wait, what do you mean that's not how I read the book? That's not how that works. I spent so long reading the book. And it's like there's a point. It's like if that's fun for you and interesting, knock yourself out, go for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if it's gonna drive you crazy, or like I have studied for this, like it's the bar exam. Like, don't do that.
No.
Like it is a game.
Yeah.
It is a hobby. It's not that deep.
Yeah. I think definitely after my first couple sessions and like having the realization of like, oh, my DM is kind of like having a little Navi that I can just ask a question to if I'm confused. And then I just went into full like, I'm very pretty and I don't know what the fuck is going on. So anytime I'm confused, I'm just going to ask you what I'm supposed to be doing or like how this thing works. And if there's a way to do the thing that I want, because that's what they're there for. Like that,
for sure.
That is what they're there for. And like just getting to the point where you're like, oh, like, yeah, no, it is okay to know dick all about the game going in and just coast on vibes and rely on the people around you to help you through it. Because if it's a good table, they're not going to make you feel bad about it. They're going to teach you. Everybody's been at the same starting point before. And we all know that we were like, yeah, I don't know shit. I don't know anything. I don't know how to go about my turn. Like if I need to sit next to somebody and they just like look over at my sheet, be like, do this and this and that. I'm like, cool, sick, thank you. And like move forward.
Yep. Which like, that is where I think like we have like Barhaven in Houston. And I'm sure it's in other cities too, where they're like, they go around and they host like D&D games. D&D. I don't know that I have ever physically been to Barhaven. I don't think I ever have.
Yeah, it's largely D&D 5e, and you show up with like a level 3 character. Yeah. All only official content, nothing funky. Just to keep everything fair. It's
because it's
point
people
by.
You don't know, DMs you don't know, and you go
just
to
keep it easy peasy. Point by. You can show up, or they have pre-established characters
that you can
just pick up. Yeah. And it's like, meant to be extremely beginner friendly.
Yeah, and like I think that is so cool because like one, it's a fun like social way to meet new people in the hobby, and like you go to like these different like bars and taverns, and you get like discounts on food and drinks and stuff, which is cool. And also like it definitely is an environment where it's like, oh, the crowd is always changing, the location's always changing, so there's no need to like, hey, if you think you embarrass yourself, no one's gonna remember. Like, no one's gonna care. It's not like you have to rock back up to the same campaign next week and be like, man, are they gonna remember that I fell in that barrel and like drowned to death? You know,
they will not.
Like, they're not.
I mean, they may still remember because it sounds funny as fuck, but you'll never have to see them again, probably.
Yeah, they're not gonna attach it to like you, the person. It'll just be something like that a character did one time, which I think that's like a very cool setup for introducing people to the hobby. And I know you've introduced a lot of people to the hobby that way.
Oh yeah, I am a shepherd for the flock at times, and be like, as soon as someone shows even a remote level of interest, I'm like, what if we just went somewhere real quick? Sure, be a shame.
And then I grab a drink.
I love watching the moment that it clicks. I love the moment that someone goes like from like, this is scary, this is new, to like them having fun and like getting it, and then suddenly be like, I do an in character thing, and I'm like, I could cry.
Like, yes, baby.
My children grow. My baby. She's flying. It's so good. It's so good. I think another thing too is like, so I used to have this issue where, especially when playing a new class that I had never touched before, I'd do my best to build something with that class, and I'd play for a while, not really knowing what the fuck I'm doing.
And through it.
Yeah, and like definitely not being the best person in combat, and like not using my turn to its full advantage because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and just bumbling around a lot and being kind of useless, until eventually I'm like, I have to have the realization where I'm like, I feel like I'm not doing enough, or I'm not doing good. And then
you're like, I'm forgetting something, or I'm not doing things in the right order or whatever.
Like this. And so eventually I would either ask like my DM or someone else, because like I have this friend, Sam, who is just a wonderful human and is a human like AI sounding board
set.
for any TTRPG. You just ask him a question and he just simply types up like a Wikipedia article off the dome.
I aged myself on that one because you were like walking AI system and I went with walking encyclopedia set. And if that doesn't describe my inner grandma, I don't know what does.
We're basically the same age.
Hey, I'm like 8 years older than you, but you know.
that 1 year really, really adds a lot, apparently.
It hits.
Went back to Oxford.
This is who I am as a person. Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, he's amazing. And I would be like, hey, here's a character I'm trying to play. Can you please just like run me through a sample combat and like walk me through how to be good?
Can I get a little tutorial?
Yeah. Tell me what are all the best things that I can do with my character, and then show me it in like a simulated combat and let me do it.
Yeah.
So that it clicks. And then from that point forward, I'm good. And so like I do that for almost every time that I have a new character in a class that I've never played. So like that would be a huge bit of advice to beginner me. It's like, hey, if you're going to try a new thing, find somebody that knows what the fuck they're doing and just do a little tutorial sesh so that you actually know what the how the fuck you're going to play this character.
That would even be kind of cool. Like if you were running a game of just like new people who'd never played it before and they didn't really know what they wanted to play, or like they maybe thought maybe they've played video games or something, so they kind of know like what archetype they're like, oh, I want to be like a tank and smash it, or I want to be like distance and be an archer or whatever, like, or a caster. Like if you could just kind of like have them test out the different like characters really quick, like just build like very basic, like
they don't even have
elven
names,
wizard. Yeah, like thing 1 through 6. And then you just you like play a round of combat with each of them and then you switch. And so you get like
that would be sick. Like a little session like, 0 tutorial.
I think that would be cool if you had like a group of people that are just brand new. You'd be like, hey, like get a little like like when you go and taste test ice cream flavors and then see what you like. Because like maybe you don't want to keep up with like spells and prepping things or whatever. Which, like, if you do want to start out with a caster and you're intimidated by that, I highly recommend sorcerers because they are very chill. And the fact that like you know what you know and that's what you got, baby. Like
that's all you got.
It took me a while to figure out how casters who prep spells, which is like literally every other caster works, like even half casters. It's like I was used to sorcerer. I'm like, hey, this is what I bring to the table. And if you want anything else, you need someone else because it's not going to be me. It's like, oh, wait, no, I'm playing a wizard. Like it in fact is me. Like that's in my book. I just need to prep that one. Like that took me a minute to get my brain around. So I was like, oh, I know all of these.
Oh, yeah, no, bitch. The Christian guilt that would take over my fucking body as a bard every time that we would enter a fucking session. And I'd be poring over my spells right before and being like, I think these are the best choices for this game. And then the situation, sure enough, comes up that I'm like, the one spell that I was debating on taking and decided not to is the one that would save all of us in this moment. And I'm like, I want to throw myself into a wall.
Like, it's the same with like with paladins, it's like everything where it's like, what do you mean the spell that I just casually cast aside? It's exactly what I needed. Or
the worst part would be like having that internal, like that monologue with myself aloud with the DM right there. And he knows that I'm struggling between these two choices and him just knowing that I'm discarding the thing that I need. I'm like, I'm like, if I could punch you, I would.
And see, like, if you play a sorcerer, you don't have to deal with that Catholic guilt. You just, if that's not a spell you know, I can't help you anymore, my friend.
That's just
my guy. Can I
interest
you in a flower? That's what I have.
I can mend your clothes. I know they got torn up when you got sliced in half, but
Yeah.
this is what I can do for you. Oh God. Yeah. No. That would fucking get me a lot.
That's still rough a little bit. Like I get even afraid of that with Strixhaven, where it's like we kind of know when we're gonna have combat, and then every other time it's pretty much like, okay, we're gonna prep our non-combat
social spells,
which, like, for my paladin is pretty, like, most of her stuff is bonk, right? So it's like she has a few non-bonk. So I always keep a couple on deck though, because I was like,
just in case somebody decides to get a little
if you're
spicy.
gonna have me out here looking foolish and I don't have like a smite or something, like a something spicy prepped.
Yeah. Hundo percent. I think also just in general, and I mean we've talked about this plenty of times, but like if I could go back and just be like, hey girl, if you've stopped having fun at this table.
Yeah, that was before we sat down to record this. I was like,
I'ma hold your hand when I say that.
Yeah. I was like, do I crack open that particular can of worms? Or do I let it lie?
Not fully, but yeah, it's just
I feel like we could do another episode on that, of like recognizing the signs that it's maybe going off the rails, and she's not gonna get back on the road.
No, yeah. Like the short and sweet is just like, if you get to any point where you're like, I'm driving to go to this D&D game and I'm kind of dreading it.
Yes, that's always my cue for, like, if I ever am feeling any amount of dread toward anything, which, like, you know, I can be a bit melodramatic and very emotional, so sometimes I be feeling big emotions over things that aren't that deep. And also, like, you know, have been in toxic environments before, so sometimes things will flag where it's like, oh, this is more about the pattern of like what my body will send as a message versus like the severity of the actual situation. But yeah, if it's anything where it's like I'm not excited to do it, or I'm not excited to go, like, you gotta start making that exit plan. Like,
yeah.
And certainly if you're like driving down every other weekend and you're having panic attacks at the start of the week because you know you're gonna have to go, then probably stop driving.
Yeah, it is not the end of the world. That is not the only time that you will get to play. And it's never worth sitting through an uncomfortable situation.
No
matter how good the game is, no matter how much you love the characters, it's always sad to be like, I'll never see this character like come to fruition or whatever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
At least not in this game, not in the story.
It'll never be like exactly what we thought. You'll never see like the full, like realize that full end state, which like there is like a grief to that. And I definitely had like a big hangover with that like eventually I kind of got through with Strixhaven. But it's like when we first were like gearing up to start Strixhaven, I'm like, I was kind of just so jaded with the whole thing. I'm like, I don't know what I want to play or that I want to play. Because it's like, like the game was fun, but it had just gotten so emotionally exhausting that I had started associating that feeling with D&D.
With the game, yeah.
Even though it was two separate things that were going on. But yeah, whether it's like something that is unhealthy or whether it's just like, you know, like the first game you played, where it's like, hey, cool that I got
just not having
to this
fun.
new thing. Yeah, it's like, it's just not really my vibe. Like, it's not, or like you're too busy because like you're an adult and like it's stressful. And it's like, I don't have the time to devote to this. And it's adding more stress to my life than fun. Like anything. Like if it's not a net positive, you can't be doing it anymore. You gotta stop, because it is a hobby. It is a game. It's supposed to be fun. And like, yeah, it's like, it's storytelling. It's a craft and there's an art form to it. And you can derive a lot of like deeper meaning and great experiences from it. But it's like, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, it's not that fucking deep.
It ain't. It really fucking ain't. Yeah. Yeah. Also, just in general, the idea of, we'll end it on a positive, that being a dungeon master or a game master or a storyteller of any fashion is not as scary as you fucking think.
100%. Yeah. There's a million ways to do it. And I think everybody should try it once.
Yeah.
Just to see, like, if nothing else, just for like an empathy perspective of seeing what it's like to be on the other side of the table. Because I think that informs how you play when you've had to sit in the conductor's seat. And then also, like, maybe you'll like it a lot more than you think.
Yeah. Like, certainly not at the beginning, the first time, but like the second time I played, when I started playing with you, if I went back to that point, would not in 1,000 fucking years think I was running my own game, much less like running mine for almost 2 years now.
Me either.
At all. Because it was so intimidating, so scary. I had no idea how I would keep track of everything. Still don't know how I keep track of everything, but I do my fucking best. But
Google Docs, baby.
It has become one of my favorite fucking things in the entire world. And it like made me fall in love with the hobby entirely all over again. Because it's just like a whole new, it's a whole new different and like deeper way to get into it. And I like am a maladaptive daydreaming girl, have always been creative, have always loved stories and all of that. And so like it bit me like a mother. And I was so scared and nervous the first time, even though I was sitting in a room full of like just my bestest fucking friends that I've never felt safer in an environment than that to start.
Still absolutely horrifying to do for the first time.
Still horrifying because I was like, what if I fuck up? But then getting to the point where you realize you're like, y'all don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to be doing out here. I could do whatever. Even if I'm fucking up, y'all don't know.
No.
Like, at all. And also, like, just finding the right people, getting to have that experience, and having the freedom and safety to explore something new and make mistakes and tell a really good fucking story with people you fucking care about. Like, that shit's, I love it. I wouldn't change it for anything else at this point.
No, I wouldn't either.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a wonderful note to end it on. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you had a good time, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddyscites.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.